I was 27 at the time, and she had just turned 24. We hit it off quickly and started dating after a few weeks. We were both very religious evangelical Christians, which made us move fast. For the most part, things were pretty good. She did show some minor red flags at times while we were dating, but most of it was small stuff that could easily be addressed and talked through, so I didn't take them too seriously. We were pretty different in a lot of ways that weren't as apparent until we got married. We dated for a little over 7 months, got engaged, and 7 months after that, we were married and enjoying our new lives together. After the wedding, we had our honeymoon phase, like all newlyweds do, but ours pretty quickly ended, about 2 months in. Very quickly, I started to notice that she was starting to control everything. We pretty much only did what she wanted to all the time, only listened to the music she wanted to, only watched movies and TV shows she wanted to, and only ate what she wanted to. As a religious man at the time, I was willing to do all of this for her to make her happy and show her that I loved and cared about her and only her. Then, our sex life started taking a hit. Anytime I would communicate that I was either in the mood or it had been a while, she would tell me she wasn't in the mood but knew I wanted to, and she felt pressured by me. The first time she told me this, I went out of my way to make it clear that we didn't have to have sex if she didn't want to. But no matter what I said or how I said it, she would continue to tell me I was pressuring her into having sex. It started to affect me in a major way because I was running out of ways to express to my wife that I had the desire to be intimate with her, and I was constantly being told I was the problem. I became incredibly self-conscious as time went on. Another thing she would criticize me for, which she was causing, eventually became a lose-lose situation because if I initiated sex, I would get shut down immediately and told to stop pressuring her. And when she initiated sex, which was rare, it would end with her mad at me for not lasting long enough or criticizing me for not being able to get her off, which just created a negative feedback loop that has heavily affected me to this day. I also started learning how aggressively political she was. She was a big lefty and vocal about it. She was also pretty into a lot of the social justice stuff, which is fine, but there is a general attitude that comes along with it, and she definitely had the attitude. I come from a pretty conservative family and held some conservative views because of my religion. She did too, but I have never been a politics person. It's something that tends to divide people far more than unify them, so I've always tried to stay out of politics as much as I possibly could. She would always talk bad about conservatives and say, in my opinion, radical stuff about political figures. I would usually try to discuss it with a level head and gently ask her if she thinks she's being a little too harsh towards conservative politicians and people in general, to which she would usually get emotional and start becoming really aggressive about her political views. I would get uncomfortable and try to change the subject pretty quickly. Shortly before we got married, I had quit my job due to overworking and underpaying and started working for the same company she was working for. Initially, I thought it would be fun to work together, and everyone at the company started to know us as the married couple. However, I quickly learned that she did not share the same enthusiasm. I'm an extremely social and outgoing person, a major extrovert, so I always tried to socialize with my coworkers and create a fun work environment. Most of my coworkers enjoyed working with me, except for my wife. When she worked with other coworkers, she was glad to be social and have conversations with them. But when we were together, she would criticize me for trying to have conversations with her while we were working because she found it distracting. The job quickly became unenjoyable with her, so I decided I wanted to cut back my hours and pursue my dream of becoming a freelance illustrator. She was supportive, so I started working about half my usual hours and took on as many freelance jobs as I could find. However, I wasn't making much money, which put pressure on our finances. Our diet was the next thing to go. She often wanted to stay home and ordered takeout for dinner, even if I had bought food to cook that evening. I was the cook in the relationship, and she seemed to be jealous of that, so we usually didn't eat at home unless she wanted to cook something or I had already started cooking before she got home. As a result, our eating habits worsened, and I started to put on weight, which she openly commented on, making me feel insecure and self-conscious. I poured more time into my workouts and started cooking my own meals while picking up whatever she wanted for herself. However, she complained that I didn't want to eat meals with her. I eventually gave in and started eating the standard American diet again with her. Jumping ahead a bit, things continued to deteriorate. She complained about and criticized everything I did, including the amount of money I wasn't making from freelancing and my forgetfulness about small things. When we did have sex, she harshly criticized my performance, and it often ended with her being angry. However, sex was very rare at this point, happening maybe once every other month. I was feeling incredibly self-conscious and as if nothing I did for her was ever enough, even though I was constantly bending over backward to make her happy. She had always struggled with depression since I knew her, and I figured that some of her behavior might stem from that. So, I started asking her if she wanted to try counseling, something I had been doing for about 6 to 7 years to help with my own issues. She had talked about wanting to try counseling again after a bad experience she had, but when I suggested it and shared how beneficial it had been for me, she insisted she didn't need it. I also asked her if she would be interested in couples counseling since we were having quite a few issues, but every time I suggested it, she would turn the focus on me and tell me that I was the one who needed counseling, not her. Around the 10-month mark of our marriage, she came to me and told me she was no longer religious. This was heartbreaking for me at the time, but I knew it wasn't the end of the world, and I understood it was a difficult decision for her. The day she told me was actually one of the best days we had had in a while. She saw how much her revelation hurt me, and she was caring and empathetic while I explained that it was hard to hear but didn't change my feelings toward her. We cried together, held each other, and told each other how much we loved each other. We even had a pretty good night of intimacy. However, the next day, her demeanor changed completely. She went from being the sweet, caring, empathetic wife who cared about me to a cold, stern, and frankly heartless individual. All the understanding and emotion from the night before were gone. She started saying things like, "This is who I am now, and you need to be okay with it, and you need to figure out if you can live with this." Anytime I tried to talk about the situation from the night prior, she was almost never home anymore. She would leave for work in the morning and return only when the sun was down. I tried to make an effort to do kind things for her to show her I was thinking about her, like surprising her by bringing her dinner to work or checking in to see if I could make her day easier. Her texts became short, and she made me feel like I was somehow bothering her by trying to do loving things for her. This was around the time she started hanging out with a coworker and friend of ours, whom we'll call Jerry. He lived on the same block as the business we worked for, and his place was the hangout and party pad for all the employees. It didn't initially bother me that they were hanging out more because I knew and trusted both of them. However, my ex started coming home later and later, telling me that she was going out to get drinks with him and a few other coworkers after closing up. My wife began spending more and more time with her coworker Jerry, going out drinking with him without inviting me or even telling me about these hangouts. This put a significant burden on me as I juggled 2 part-time jobs while also taking on all the household responsibilities. I found myself doing all the cleaning, cooking, laundry, mowing, dishes, home improvement, and shopping. I also took care of our 2 dogs and 2 cats full-time. One night, when we had plans to go out together, she came home late and I had cooked for her. However, she informed me that she was struggling with our relationship, feeling alone and unheard. In my desperation to make things work, I took full responsibility for her feelings and pledged to do everything I could to fix the issue. I suggested couples counseling, but she refused. In the following months, it seemed like things were improving. She became more present and less easily agitated. To make the relationship work, I essentially stopped caring about my own needs and focused on fulfilling her every desire, even though I was miserable. It was an exhausting and draining experience. We took a vacation to the UK for 2 weeks, which was enjoyable, despite her preference for staying in the Airbnb for part of the trip. However, upon our return, her behavior shifted again. She started getting into Jerry's music taste, something she had never done with me, and expressed a dislike for my music taste. The breaking point came on Halloween night when we were out celebrating with friends. I had to work the next morning, while she wanted to go to a dance party with our co-workers. I wished her a good night and told her to have fun, expecting to see her when I got home. However, she didn't return that night. When I woke up the next morning and realized she wasn't home, I assumed she had stayed with a friend due to excessive drinking, which had happened in the past. I texted her, but there was no response. Worried and unable to locate her phone, I reached out to everyone we were with that night, trying to find out where she had gone. A coworker eventually informed me that the last time she saw her was at Jerry's apartment, waiting for an Uber. I couldn't understand why she declined a free Uber and decided to drive home instead, especially since her phone was left in her car. My panic turned to anger, wondering if she was still at Jerry's apartment. I was working just 200 feet away from there, and her car was parked right outside. Eventually, she texted me, telling me she was home about an hour before I got off work. However, she didn't come inside to tell me she was okay or explain where she had been. None of it sat well with me, and I was left feeling uneasy and frustrated with the situation. After a night of worry and confusion, I decided to stop by the store to get my wife's favorite snack and some Pedialyte, assuming she was hungover. As I was walking into the store, she called me and asked where I was. I told her, and she urgently asked me to come home and talk to her. I asked if everything was okay, and she replied with a somber no. I hung up and drove home, my mind racing in panic the entire time. When I arrived home, she was sitting on the couch with a pouty expression. I sat down next to her and asked what was going on. That's when she confessed that the previous night, she had drunk too much, stayed at Jerry's place, slept in his bed, and made out with him, but they didn't have sex. I stayed calm and told her that she and Jerry had lost all my trust. Her response was devastating. She said the experience had made her realize how unhappy she was with me and that she could no longer be with me. My heart sank. I had poured my entire life into trying to meet her needs and make her happy, but none of it had ever been seen or acknowledged. It seemed that nothing I could ever do would be enough for her. We separated for a weekend, with me staying with my parents and her sister coming down to stay with her to help her process her actions. After the weekend, we came back together, but her decision remained unchanged. On our 1-year anniversary, she asked me for a divorce. By this time, the good husband in me had died. I realized that I was wadding my life and efforts, scratching the wrong post. I had to get back at my wife, all my love, my dedication to our relation was broken and I had to have my payback. I had to salvage my life now. I removed all my money as cash and kept it with my parents and asked them to keep it safe, and I let them know that I planned to divorce my wife and do not share a dime with her. I did tell them that my wife cheated on me and no longer deserves my love and my money. The house deed was on my wife and my name, so I did not bother to touch it. My wife and I never had any joint account, and that was a great relief. With the money taken care of, I now shifted my focus on how to get back at Jerry. Jerry was single and during most of the month out of money. Know that he did not earn less, he was bad at managing it. Weekly parties and expensive alcohol. I knew he had a shaky character. I knew how to get him. Thursday morning I went online and searched for an escort service. I did find a great-looking lady and asked her to meet me for lunch. Her name was Jane. I don't think that was her real name. We met at a nice restaurant and I asked her for a favor and offered double the money for the job. Money works all the time. I gave her a picture of Jerry and explained what she needed to do. This Friday was going to be good. Friday night, just as is suspected, my wife and Jerry hit the local bar and they were loading fast on alcohol. Drinking like a fish would be best to describe them. As planned, my lovely Jane walked past Jerry slowly rubbing his elbow. As expected, Jerry excused himself and went after Jane. After waiting for a few minutes, my wife followed after Jerry and found him making out with Jane. That scene blew my wife's lid off. She raged and started hitting Jerry. There were screams and I soon saw Jane running towards me. I quickly held her hand and rushed out of the bar. I was laughing all the way to my car. The atmosphere was charged with me and Jane all sweating and excited. It did happen, in our car in the parking. We went to my place for round 2. Next morning Jane left and I found a note stating that it was the most fun night she had in a long time. I checked my phone and it was full of messages from friends and co-workers. Apparently, there was a big fight at the local bar last night and my wife was the center of it. She turned into an Amazon and beat Jerry to the edge of his life. The fight escalated all over the bar, from the washroom where it started to the kitchen to the bar. Jerry had to be rushed to the emergency and received multiple stitches on his forehead. She smashed 3 wine bottles on his head. Also beat him up with a meat tenderizer. The chef who tried to stop her was also injured. The entire incident was captured by multiple bystanders and was all over social media. My wife was arrested and was in the county jail. I was shocked and surprised that my timid and calm wife was such a violent human being. Although I was happy with the results, I did not intend to have anyone hurt and in hospital. I only wanted my wife to realize that she dumped an honest man for a lecherous jerk. However, hearing my wife is in jail was a pure joy. I received multiple calls from friends and co-workers offering support and played along. For her actions that night my wife had received the nickname the cheating Amazon. For the next 3 days the news was on every paper and every local channel. I was approached multiple times for comments but each time I refused. It was a wild circus. Our office took a note of the situation and promptly fired both Jerry and my wife. My divorce proceedings started soon and I don't see any reason for my wife to be able to contest me for a lot of money. Few days later, as I stood in a cold courtroom, the weight of the world on my shoulders, I couldn't help but reflect on the tumultuous journey that had brought me here. The divorce papers lay before me, a culmination of a relationship that had soured beyond repair, and a stark reminder of the chaos that had unfolded in recent months. I had once believed in the power of love and the sanctity of marriage. The woman who had been my wife for 7 years was now sitting in a jail cell, the result of a violent confrontation with her affair partner. It was a day that forever changed the trajectory of our lives. I had always been a firm believer in second chances, but there are some betrayals that shatter trust so completely that even forgiveness seems like a distant dream. My wife's affair had been one such betrayal, and her violent outburst was the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. As I sat in that courtroom, watching the judge finalize our divorce, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The legal proceedings had been grueling, and I had sought the counsel of a skilled attorney to ensure that I got what I deserved from the settlement. Her actions had tarnished our relationship beyond repair, and I wanted a clean break. The settlement was not in her favor. Her violent behavior had left her with no alimony or claim to our assets. It was a harsh reality, but it was a result of her own choices and actions. I had spent countless nights awake, wrestling with the guilt and sadness that came with ending a marriage. But in the end, I had to prioritize my well-being. I had to move forward and rebuild my life without the weight of a tumultuous marriage dragging me down. Walking out of that courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The chapter of my life that had been defined by a failing marriage and a painful betrayal was finally over. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was determined to embrace the future with hope and optimism. In the end, I had found the strength to stand up for myself. I had chosen a path of healing and self-discovery, leaving behind a marriage that had become a source of pain and turmoil. As I walked away from the courthouse, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope for the future, a future that I would shape on my terms, free from the shadows of a broken relationship. Dear listener, if you have reached this far, please consider subscribing our channel as it helps and motivates us to continue our work.